Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thanks for stopping by again. I've had quite an interesting last few weeks. And to begin with, in the last video, which is now a ways back there, I announced the creation of a site called PanamaWave.com, a service to provide assistance to people who are buying or renting real estate here in Panama in the coming months. There was a number of practices I dislike. I talked about those and discussed how I wanted to approach it. Introduced Maurice Belenguer, who is the, we call a strategic partner. In other words, we're not business partners. We don't own the same business. We own separate businesses, but we're working together as partners in this particular effort that Panama Wave is a sponsor of, and Maurice's real estate agency provides the critical partnership support. Now, the website went out first here, and then in a newsletter to Retirement Wave membership, and everything seemed to be just fine. And then we started getting messages back in from people. A couple of them right out here, sitting out there listening to me. Well, a couple, probably 10 of you. I wish I had a list of everyone's names. I could take you all individually. But people were coming and saying, I can't find your site. I'm getting an error message back. Oh, no. I mean, how could that be? That should not happen. This is probably 27 years now since I first created my first website. It was a nonprofit website, man, a long time ago, 20th century. And I'd never had anything like this happen before. You launch a website, it's a process called propagation. It simply begins showing up all over the world. And within a matter of a relatively short period of time, it has spread throughout the internet, and people can find it. This was not working in the way it should have. And something had changed, and something had interrupted. So we ended up with some portion of the total planet getting it. I would say it's probably half or more than half did get it as anticipated, but others didn't, and the remainder didn't. And I started getting these emails in saying, Bob, I can't get through to it. I even typed the address into the bar, and at the top of my screen, it just still doesn't get me there. And I said, I see. And so we started asking people, what's your experience? In one case, someone suggested it was the VPN they were using that was a problem. That's not the case, as it turns out. But I mean, people were being very kind. And we went to work trying to find out what in God's creation had gone on here, because I was really at a loss for words. I'd just never, ever seen anything like this. And we had different, tax support teams, and there were disagreements, and people had different ways of looking at it. And I'm just so frustrated, you can't even imagine, because this is totally not supposed to happen. And yet here it is happening. And those of you who were out there who wrote me and told me your problems, we went back to you often and said, could you try it again? And tell us what happened. And people were so good about the whole thing that I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I often do this myself. I run into a website and something doesn't work as it should be working, and I sit right down and write them immediately and say, look, this link isn't working. And I've gotten more than one thank you note for that, because these things do happen. This was a big glitch, though, and it was one in which we could not get unanimity of opinions as to why it was going the way it was. I'm not even going to begin to get involved with it. It is over. So there is a link to it if you haven't tried already, or if you did try and didn't get through. There's one right below this video. And in addition, there's another one to a new page that just got put up. And that is because during the same period of time, when we're trying to get this sorted out with the website, we had the first person to use the Panama Wave approach. It's what we've been talking about, what we have up at the website, is coming to the completion. And long story, but there'd been an interruption. He had to go up north and so forth, and he had time. We had to get things settled down here. And, we had the owner lived in one nation is a national of yet another nation, and we have a client from a third nation. Isn't it fun? So we have all this going on, all sorts of lawyers and legal people and banks and so on getting in touch with each other. And of course there were banking challenges. It seems in Panama, banks run hot and cold in this business, and getting a straight story from them and getting things done has been so difficult now for several years. It's just very frustrating. And the pandemic didn't help. And they are very focused on themselves and what they consider to be worth their time and effort. And I might say this is this particular home purchase. It's certainly not a question of the size of the home purchase involved. Nobody would say that was too cheap or something of that sort. But the point is that we just didn't we couldn't trust them to be there when we needed them to be there. And so we're coming to an end of it, and they're not there, and it's not happening. And that's that. So Maurice had to get to work and find a replacement. Easier said than done sometimes. But that's the key in dealing with people, old people, like Maurice and myself. I've been through this more than once. And he is particularly well positioned for it, having been the executive director of the American Chamber of Commerce. He knows business leaders, including banks, out to the community. They do not do special favors for him. There's nothing like that. Indeed, he can run into a brick wall as much as anyone else, but he usually finds another brick wall that he can find a door, and he keeps working at it. And we got the whole thing, much thanks to Maurice, and to a very patient client, Sean, who asked lots of very good questions, was totally involved in the process from the beginning, and it was very helpful and very thoughtful. And even though for him, much of this came as a great surprise. And when you're from outside, you get to learn how things are done. They're done differently here. It doesn't mean that it's illegal or anything else or something immoral or whatever. It's just different. So we went to work on it, and that has worked out well. And now, Sean was kind enough, he sent us a review of the process from his perspective. And he said, if you want to use that as a testimonial, you're free to use it. And, well, since nobody has had that experience except him at this point, the whole experience, it's now up at the site. I'll leave a special link to that specifically so you can hear in his words. I think we didn't change a single word of it. It's how he felt about it and how he saw the whole situation. And I think it's useful, because otherwise you just listen to me talk and listen to, eventually you'll be listening to Maurice talk too, and so forth. To have somebody who's an actual client go through that whole process and meet the many challenges that can come up and come through intact and so forth, and as always with a good sense of humor, Sean's that kind of guy, then it's useful to share it with others. So there it is. So my apologies to those of you who may have thought you were going to go see PanamaWave.com and tried to get there and couldn't get there, and 2 days later couldn't get there and so forth, and gave up hope and everything else. Something was totally wrong with Bob's website, Well, like I said, I'm not going to carry you through all the details of that one, but we're in fine shape now, and we hope you'll take a minute to take a look at what already better than 1,000 people from the website and from YouTube, but from the website particularly, have had a chance to take a look at. These are the members at Retirement Wave. So I will leave it at that for the moment. I'm going to come back in just a second with a couple more things. As I've said before, I am working on the newsletter for Retirement Wave. These things tend to be long and detailed and go into a lot of stuff, as people who've read them in the past know. And those are folks who go to retirementwave.com and just subscribe there. As I always say, I will also have a link to it from here. Whether or not you get notified by YouTube of that email or not, I never know whether that particular video is being brought to your attention or not. I mean, YouTube does, well, what it can do, I guess, whatever the case may be. I will mention it at least a couple of times so that for those who don't want to be bothered with the subscription, it's perfectly okay because it doesn't cost you anything and it's easy to get off the list if you want to, anytime you want to. It just means, the only thing it means is that you automatically get a copy of it. And it can be a while before it comes out. I am working on it. I've spent a good deal of time today working on a couple new things that I'm looking at. And I'm going to just say in finishing that, and in very general terms now, because I have no crystal ball, so why should I pretend I do? I don't. People do often ask, is this buyer's market going to maintain itself for a long time? Is it going to be here for a while later, and so on and so on and so on? Is there any reason to think it might suddenly change or whatever? And guys, that way lies lunacy when you try to figure out what's going to happen in any market in advance. I have so many people I have watched over the last 55 years of my work, and in my business at least, make all sorts of predictions, 98% of which never came true. And they have since forgotten they even made them. And 2% may have come out more or less right. Rarely do they ever hit it on the head. So for me to think that I can do that, of course, is silly. But there are a couple trends. One is that what I'm noticing now in the statistics I'm going through, but I need more in order to feel that I've really got something interesting to share. And if I do, I'll be sharing it with you. And that is one group that, we're small, keep in mind, we're a small market. 5,000 people showed up with an interest to purchase homes and everything would turn upside down. I mean, there'd be parades in the streets. But anyhow, it doesn't take a lot to dramatically impact a relatively small market. But that's true of a lot of relatively small markets, and not everybody's going to get that, and very few people do, and there's no reason to automatically assume we're going to. Since we do a really poor job of marketing ourselves as a country, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, could do a lot better. But anyhow, the point is very simple. There are people who do follow us and who are interested in us, and they come from other Latin American countries. This has always been the case. Latin America is in very serious trouble. A lot of countries are. It could get much worse. And with the food shortages as a result of the European war and all this sort of business, it's a mess. And we complain sometimes here, and we shouldn't. And we're so much better off than pretty much everybody else. And we have a cheery future ahead of us. I was just going through some of the stats recently. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be another one of those years when we do better in our GDP growth and what have you than the experts predicted earlier. And that seems to be, yeah, we'll see. I continue. I won't make any predictions on that either. I did last time. I was right. But that was good luck, I trust. Whether I bother now, I don't know. But it looks like we are having a stronger recovery than we had anticipated we would have. That's cool. But other countries, not so much. And I'm particularly following certain countries whose people traditionally have not come in any large number at all to Panama, who have no particular business relationship with Panama, whose nation does not use the Panama Canal for moving goods, except once in a blue moon, and hardly ever that. I mean, it doesn't even register on the list of clients of the canal. Maybe they're 118 or something like that. So I'm thinking of one country in particular where I hadn't expected to see an increase in permanent residency visas coming out of them. And I follow those, of course, as I do for a number of countries and everything else. The information's all out there. If you know where to find it, you go look for it. And this country and a couple others, I'm watching several. But this one is particularly interesting. And that combined with some news stories about them and so forth, reminds me of another country that did this some years ago, and it had quite a dramatic impact. So I'll leave it at that. If it amounts to anything, it will be very, very interesting because it's quite different than the one before, too. It would be very much one of its kind. And yet, it may only be a relatively small group of people, relatively early on, and who may later decide otherwise and so forth. But it's not, I've never seen anything quite like it from them. So, that sort of thing can make a big difference. If Latin American, as I've said before, and I don't mean to hurt anyone's feelings, but the poison, political poison in this continent throughout decades has been the same one. Left wing, right wing, back and forth, swing, sharp swings back and forth. And right now, people up north talk about a big shift to the left. 4 or 5 years ago, it was a big shift to the right. I mean, who do you think they're taking the place of? The people they took the place of, and so on. It's just not how it operates in Panama. And for better or for worse, and I know some people here complain bitterly. They come from both ends of the spectrum, and they feel cheated somehow because we're a Latin American nation and we don't do that. We tend to be pretty much in the center, and we don't actually sit around and worry about it. Now, Panamanians are Panamanians. They're stubbornly different and they're independent-minded, more so than you think. They may be very polite, and they are. And they may not want to hurt anyone's feelings, and they don't. And they are not certainly, everybody that you meet down here isn't. Of course, as I say, they speak Spanish. They might be Panamanian, but they might not. You need to get to know Panamanians. But they have very strong feelings, and one of those is a very powerful sense of patriotism. And a very real sense of, we will work this out. And we are very angry, but we will work this out. Is that clear? I mean, this is the sort of tension that exists, but nonetheless it's creative and it's positive. And so I sit and watch it unfold, and it's not like any other country in the region. It's why recently one of the big folks in Latin American analysis has been for many years a very, very intelligent man and lives down in Colombia. He listed all the various Latin American countries and their swings one direction to the other. And then he pointed out this tiny little group, of which we are a member, he referred to simply as boring. I love it. We're boring. Yes, thank you. Yes, we're not. We're not at all. It's a very dynamic society, and it's hard at work here. But we're boring in the sense that we don't make news headlines for other countries to put on their newspapers and what have you. It's very rare there's anything. As I often said, we get upset here, we set fire to a tire, or 2 or 3 tires, or even 6 tires. And that makes a lot of smoke, and we feel very excited about the whole thing. That's really about the extent. In other countries, they gun people down. In several countries here, police have shot people. People have gone and burned up billions of dollars of public facilities and what have you, and terrible, I mean, it's just unspeakable stuff and unimaginable in Panama. And we don't get half the credit we get. So we're boring, great. So there's that. But we are known for that, even though many people are annoyed by us because we don't swing back and forth like they do. This is where they come, because it's stable. For all we think of swinging back and forth is so little compared to what they have to put up with every day. This is where they come. Panamanians do not go the other direction for that reason to their place. No, not at all. People vote with their feet. I often say that. So that is a possibility. If it's a bad year, if things really start going wrong, particularly in South America, they've already gone wrong in Nicaragua, they've already gone wrong in Venezuela, but if they really go wrong elsewhere, we could see people with enough money to get out early, which has happened in the past, come up, and they have an impact, as the Venezuelans did in the early years of their departure from the nation. Now over 7 million strong in their of refugees. Incredible situation. So that's a possibility. It's possible. And the second one is, quite frankly, and I'm just going to leave it at this, is there's a war going on in Europe, people. It's going to get colder. All sorts of things can go wrong. God help us, let's hope none of them go wrong. and that this ceases to be an issue no one has to even talk about it soon. But, yeah. We have a larger European communities here than we did when I first arrived. And so more people are aware of us in Europe. There are more flights from Europe. They just reestablished one from Istanbul, which draws people from the Middle East, from Europe, from Asia, all around. They come into that one, direct flights. We shared a flight with Bogota. Now we have 3 direct flights on our own. And as you may have noticed when you get flying down, that most of the flights here, I've been told by people coming down, are full. And that's because there are fewer flights, so they're making sure that they had those planes filled up from a money viewpoint. But nonetheless, more flights are being opened, more airports are being opened. We're getting back to where we were before things started and before the pandemic interfered with travel. So as that happens, it's changing. And it's conceivable that if things really went wrong, you got to go somewhere. More people know about Panama than ever known about it before. And they don't know about the Panama. It's not the Panama Papers. It certainly isn't Manuel Noriega that's attracting anybody. That's ancient history, all right? It's what is today. And so that's possible. I certainly would not recommend that you bet money on it, okay? But I don't do that sort of thing. This is not my sort of role. But I am watching both with a great deal of care. I take a lot of time and effort into both, following South America and following the war. So let us hope that whatever comes of it, it is positive for everybody involved. Thank you very much for stopping by. I will be back a little bit shorter time at this time, assuming that we don't have another one of these crises coming up. But in the meantime, do visit out at PanamaWave.com if you haven't already. If you are headed down this way, we can be of any help to you. We will be most happy to be so, and we will look forward to meeting you. So thank you very much for dropping in.